Hi, my name is Stephanie Stillo, and I'm a curator in the Rare Books and Special Collections Division, and I am delighted to welcome you to another segment of From the Vaults. So one of the things that you may not know about the Rare Books Division is that in addition to books, we also purchased artist archives. And these are artists that are working in the field of fine press and artist books and even typography. So we have the historic archives of Frederick Goudy and Victor Hammer, as well as more contemporary artists like Russell Merritt and Claire Van Fleet. In 2018, we acquired the archive of Walter Hamadej and the Perishable Press. So to talk more about this archive, we are joined by Emily Moore, our current librarian in residence, who is actively processing the archive. So we're going to learn more about Walter and what is happening in the Perishable Press archive. So Emily, welcome. So Emily, you are an archivist that is getting to know this artist through his archive. So tell me about Walter Hamadej.
Well, so Stephanie, as you know, unlike a lot of the other people here at Rare Books, I never actually met or spoke with Walter myself, so I'm getting to know him completely through his archive. And the nature of archival work is that it's very intimate and it's very detail-oriented. So I'm encountering Walter through his extensive collection of journals. I'm finding him in things like his correspondence that he had with artists and other loved ones. This is a letter he wrote to his mother in 1958. And I'm also encountering him through the products of his work. So Walter was a poet, he was a visual artist, he was a bookmaker, he was a professor. He was somebody who was very cerebral, he was funny, he was quite critical and challenging. He was a guy who celebrated being born on a Friday the 13th. He stated that he professed rather than taught for over 30 years, and he really dedicated his life to the production of fine letterpress books. He was very funny, and he was also a little bit challenging.
So tell me what's going on with this calendar.
So Walter was also somebody who was really engaged with his environment. He was this ardent observer and recorder of his whole life, and we see this in his journals and his poetry, and also through the books that he made. We do have all of his journals, but they are actually off limits to researchers until 2026. But until then, we have things like this wonderful annotated wall calendar. So this is Walter's wall calendar from 1979, and in it we get this sense of how he really liked to mix the fantastic with the quotidian. So just in 1 month, we'll see him talk about things like the weather, making spaghetti sauce, watching films like Seven Samurai, and then he says those things right along things like the birth of his children and the days that he's getting significant funds and grants for his work. Another thing that's really wonderful about these calendars is we get a sense of Walter's graphic abilities, his love for words, and also his gift at making a really large visual impact with relatively little ornament. So these wall calendars give us a sense not only of his environment, but also his response to it. And a lot of the things that we see show up in the calendars later appear in the Perishable Press books.
Interesting. And are there several of these calendars?
Yes, we have a whole collection of them.
Fascinating. So tell me a little bit more about the Perishable Press. What did it offer, do you think, at the time that was so unique and necessary?
So Walter founded the Perishable Press as an undergraduate student in 1964. And then shortly after that, he founded the Shadwell Paper Mill, through which he made these really beautiful handmade papers that we see appear in Perishable Press books. And after leaving graduate school, he ended up running both companies out of his home for over 40 years. And during that time, he published 131 titles, 27 of which he actually directly contributed to as either a visual artist or a poet in that livre d'artiste tradition that you're so familiar with. So here we have this wonderful book. This is a 1980 publication. This is called Why Did You Did It? It was actually
fun title.
Wonderful title. It was actually created as a fundraising device for his daughter Laura's school. So the textual component is really a kids say the darndest things. It's quotations from Laura and who he refers to as her colleagues or her classmates. And then the text is accompanied by these really beautiful illustrations by Ellen Lanyon. This little book, it's poignant, it's funny, it's kind of quietly beautiful, and in that way it's really quintessential Perishable Press.
Yeah, beautiful.
Another wonderful thing that the Perishable Press did was offer this great opportunity to experiment. So Walter was interested in critiquing and celebrating the book form through calling attention to it. So here we have one of his Gabberjabs, and we can see that he's experimenting here using different types of materials and paper. The Gabberjabs were a series of 8 books that he produced over about 30 years. This is the final Gabberjab. It's number 8. It's titled Hunkering, and it's really the crescendo of the work. We see Walter look at both form and then also the way that language functions.
So can you tell me a little bit about these numbers that are here? This is really interesting.
It's actually really fun. So this is another great example of Walter's sort of playful experimental spirit. The footnotes in the Gabberjabs actually run consecutively across all 8 books, which means that by the time we get to number 8, we are actually starting with footnote 427. Okay. But you'll notice that he's using earlier footnotes here, which means that for me as a reader, to try to construct the meaning that Walter has left for me here, I actually have to go back to an earlier book to find footnote 140. So reading this book becomes this very circular physical exercise in which I am also having to help construct meaning. And again, that's very perishable press. Yeah. You're offered an experience as much as you are a beautiful object.
Yeah, interesting, and it connects so much with the other books in his collection as well, which is really fascinating to see those threads.
100%.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, but Walter didn't just create books, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about his larger corpus of work? And then also how the books fit into that.
100%. So in addition to the book work, Walter's main visual medium was really that of collage. Mm-hmm. And it was a practice that allowed him to experiment with the material of paper, which was something that he just loved. Yeah. And his collages can really be considered a sort of meta work, and that he's literally cutting up and layering paper materials in the same way that he's cutting up and layering concepts and meaning. And that's really the central question across all of Walter's works, his books and his collage, is how we use visuals and signals and signs to communicate ideas and subvert expectation.
Yeah, and what's so interesting to me is that everything on this table has a similar look. There's a thread that kind of goes through all of it. Do you see that as well?
It's such a great observation. So there's a few visual tropes that we see across his work. He tends to use maps a lot, but then we also see this recurring use of the human body and anatomy. So here we actually have Walter's very first copy of Gray's Anatomy, and this was given to him by his mother Ruth, who he loved. He actually left a few photos of her in this book. So this was her copy from medical school. She saw Walter's gift and interest in collage as a young kid, so she gave him this book, and we can really see how that thing at a very young age sort of set the visual tone across his work.
Yeah, that's really lovely. For those of us that did know Walter, we all have great stories about his mother, which is really wonderful that comes up so directly in the archive.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Emily, this has been so incredibly interesting. And I love this idea of learning about Walter through the archive. So as you're processing all of this and this huge archive, what are you learning about Walter?
You know, one of the most fulfilling things about getting to work as an archivist is helping to ensure someone's legacy through the survival of their materials over time. Yeah. And as we talked about, you know, in relationship to the calendar, Walter himself was very reflective. He really recorded a lot, and he very deliberately organized his archive before it even came to the library. Yeah. This is a collection that's about 111 linear feet. In addition to the personal and professional things that we have, like on this table, there's a lot of wild stuff in this collection. We have parts of his students' work, there are oil paintings, there are selections from his library with his annotations in the books, there are boxes and boxes of rubber stamps that he made. So it's this very eclectic collection, and that way I think it really embodies Walter. Yeah. And you know, anybody who's had the pleasure of getting to work in an archive or who has encountered a basement or an attic filled with papers has a sense of what a physical legacy looks like. But Walter also has this really interesting conceptual legacy that you experience sort of when you're encountering a Gabberjab, for example. He was a little bit wily, he was demanding, he was unpredictable, and the archive itself really has that. Through the different materials, I'm actually able to track one day in Walter's life. I can look at his journal entry for that day, I can look at the correspondence he was doing, I can look at the calendar, I can look at the poem he was writing, and all of those different materials offer a sort of different facet of his personality. Yeah. So it's just such a dynamic collection, and I'm really excited to see what scholars and artists do with it in the future.
Yeah, it's really exciting to think about what we bring to the table. You are an archivist, I am a historian, we have reference librarians, and we all approach it from sort of a different angle. So it's really fun to see your perspective on this and to kind of come with you on this journey. It's been really wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah.